Living in Appalachia is rough. We deal with violence, gun violence, assault, sexual assault, and rape. And these are things that may be talked about within our podcast. And we just want to let you know, viewer and listener discretion is advised. We live in some of the oldest mountains in the world.
Stolen land, stolen again to create the extraction state.
We are real people talking about real things in a real way.
This is Appalachian Living.
Hello, welcome to Appalachian Living. What episode is this? 8?
9.
9?
This is episode 9.
Episode 9. This is, last one, it was just me and Danielle. It was my cousin.
Which I'm a little jealous.
I'm sorry.
She's so cool.
I know, she's awesome, isn't she?
She's really cool. And
She's great.
I loved watching her. She was so much fun to watch. So.
She's going to come back.
Good.
I'm going to try to have her and Remy, her daughter, wants to come back too. So, and I'm trying to plan something where they'll be back this summer, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So just a couple of, what do we call it?
Housekeeping
things. Please review our podcast on Spotify or YouTube or wherever you see us. Reviewing us apparently helps us get up in the SEO or whatever. So if you could just, even if you don't like us, I don't care. Give us a crappy review. I mean, hell, whatever. And that, I guess that, and then also if you want to, because we've had a few people reach out to us and we're always trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And we're both, working wives and mothers and busy and scatterbrained and ADHD, and we forget and we don't have our lists that we should. Like I'm writing my list right now of things that I want to talk about. But if you want to tell your story about anything, Appalachia, we had some people, I remember seeing some comments of people whose grandparents were on the Battle of Blair Mountain. Anything Appalachian, if you have, I don't know, any cool stories, whatever. And it doesn't have to be just West Virginia. Appalachian Mountains are a big...
I think 11 or 12 states
exactly
are included in the Appalachian region.
Yeah, and so Danielle, she was born here, but she lives in North Carolina now. She's not in the mountain part. She's in the Piedmont part of North Carolina, but there's mountains. There's the mountain part of North Carolina. Yeah, it really is. So, yeah, if you have a story about anything, really, love to hear it.
And it's spring and summertime, so foraging. If folks are into foraging, I would like to learn more about that. If we have, some plant folks on and some people who know, I have some resources I can invite on. But if other folks are interested in sharing information about that, that would be a lot of fun.
I'd love to hear it too, because we went mugging with your sister, and she knows a lot, and I'm trying to learn, and I teach myself. I take a picture of plants and then I look it up on Google and I try to teach myself, and I've taught myself quite a bit by doing that, but I'd love to have a person tell me and show me and
some expertise.
Yes, please. So if you're someone that wants to talk about that, please just message us and set a date. We're usually evenings, weekends. So just be hey, here in a few weeks or whatever, because if you're sometime will never happen. I'm sorry. I'm tired and I forget what happened yesterday. Yeah. So I think that's probably it. And then today we have planned to talk about things. Have you ever almost died?
So what prompted this line of thought was water safety in the summertime.
Yeah.
We have a lot of water recreation in our state. A lot of folks fish and swim and boat.
Rafting.
They raft in our rivers. And so when you grow up here and you play around the water, we talk about playing in the creek all the time, which is one way to play in the water. But when you play in moving water and big rivers and lakes, you should always have a life jacket on. And so water safety around where I grew up was a really important topic, and they even offer free life jackets. Some programs do that during the summer, which is amazing. And I have a should have worn a life jacket story that I tell people to remind them that even those of us who grow up here and play in this river every summer for our entire life can make one mistake and lose our lives.
That's all it takes.
Just that one moment of losing respect and remembering where you are and what's going on. And I consider that a near-death experience, because had I not known from years of water safety training what to do, I may have drowned. And so I like to share that story as kind of a warning for people that don't get too cocky.
Tell that story. So what happened? Because, when we talk about playing in the creek here, the creek behind my house is, really, even when there's a good amount of water, if you got some good waders, you can wade across it.
Yeah.
And we used to play in it and catch crawdads and fish. And so only when it's like flooding is it, rip roaring and very dangerous. But hey, I've heard you can drown in a tablespoon of water.
That's
right?
True. And the New River is
And you have the New River.
Yeah, so this happened on the New River. And there are, everybody I know has a story of someone they knew who was very familiar with the river or a creek or a body of water and still perished.
I know. I do.
And that's so, I grew up near Sandstone Falls, which is a spectacular water feature on the New River in the national park now. And my dad, in the summertime, my family would bale hay. And so you get covered in hayseed and you get very sweaty. So our treat at the end of the day for working in the hay fields was to go to the river and rinse the hayseed off, is what we would say. And that involved swimming in the lower set of the falls at Sandstone Falls. There are kind of two sets of falls. There are a bigger set and then a lower set. And the boardwalk now is built out to the lower set. But before the boardwalk was there, before the park was there, my dad, when he was a little boy, would go there with his grandfather and his father, and they would swim and play. And there's a natural water slide in the middle of the lower falls. And so he'd bundle us up in life jackets and take us out there on the rocks, and you can walk, a good ways out into the river. And you'd sit on that rock and you'd slide off into it, and it would kind of push you into a big open pool. And it was a good little ride. You're out in the middle of the river and bobbing along, and, it's probably 50 or 60 yards downriver where
But you always had a life jacket on, right?
Always. And my dad would catch flack from people who would be there to sightsee, and they'd see these two little girls out there in the middle of the river, and they'd yell at him, "Get those kids out of the river." And he'd say, "I am here watching them, and they have life jackets on. They're fine. Thank you. Enjoy your afternoon," So as a kid, I did this a lot. As a young teenager, I did it. And then I didn't do it for a while because teenagers stop doing the things that are, that little kids do and do other things. My first year of college, I went there with a friend and forgot to respect the river and was showing off and wanted to show him the water slide in the middle of the river. And so I go out and I sat down, and as soon as I pushed off of the rock, when the rock ended, I went straight down. The force of the water pushed me straight down. And if I had to guess, it was probably like 15 or 20 feet. It was down. And as soon as I went under, the first thought was life jacket. Shit. And so because of my years of training and knowing what not to do, it's often a common reflex when you find yourself in that situation to throw your arms and your hands out and try to flail and get back to the surface. And I had learned that by doing that, you can often get caught by underwater trees, whatever's at the bottom of the falls. So I balled up into a little ball. And I also knew where I would come out. I had knowledge of the place I was, so I didn't panic and think that how long was it going to be before I could surface? So I had some factors helping me. When I did surface, way downriver. And I came out of the water with a gasp and a yell. The person I was with was standing looking down into the hole where I had gone down, panicking.
Do you know how long you were down?
I mean, if I had to guess, probably like 20 seconds.
But it probably felt
It felt
like forever.
It felt a lot longer.
Especially when you're being like sloshed around.
And I told you earlier, like I could see, I was so deep that it was dark around me and I could see light at the surface. So I was pretty deep, but I also, again, knew if I just hung in there that it would slow down, the current would slow down, and I would pop out in that pool. When he heard me surface, he saw me and came running down river. And I sat on that river bank and shook. Even telling it now makes me very emotional because it was one of those moments, you hear these TikTok videos of it was at that moment she knew she'd fucked up. If ever there was a moment, it was that
My whole life flashed before my eyes.
But I tell that story a lot because it's important to share that.
Well, it
Sure.
takes one little mishap of just not thinking.
One
And-
little lack of judgment or moment where you don't respect it.
And teenagers often do that. Teenagers often do that. And the stories that I know are teenagers.
Absolutely, because that's when you make your mistakes. And if you're lucky enough to survive, you can tell your stories and hopefully other people will learn from them. A friend of mine that I had known since elementary school perished in the river one summer. It was probably around that same time. He came into the bait store. I worked at Woods's bait store in Hinton, and he came in to get bait. We talked about fishing. We talked about meeting up on the river. And a couple hours later, he was dead. He had drowned
Oh, my goodness.
where we were going to meet and fish. And so I'm sharing these stories now because it's timely. We're getting ready to start playing in the water, and I want
is.
people to be thoughtful. My son went to the ocean a couple years ago, and because we are so adamant about a life jacket, particularly his dad, he wore a life jacket on the beach. I've never seen a kid, well, maybe a handful throughout my life. I've seen kids with a little, tight-fitting life vest, but not like a full-blown life jacket. But it felt right and it felt good because he was staying above the water, and I knew that even if he got pulled away from shore, he would stay on the surface. And it just occurred to me that it's just so smart. It's such a smart thing for both adults and children to do. So you can still enjoy the water. And I'd like to see us, get more in the habit of more people doing that.
How is it? Can we normalize?
Can we normalize life jackets and maybe have some cute ones instead of the big bulky ones?
Yeah.
I know there are fitted,
There's a few, yeah.
life vests and things like that, but
They're probably expensive too.
I'd say they are.
The whole giving life vests away is a really good idea.
And I'll have to look into that. I feel like it was one of the local organizations in town, the Elks or the Rotary. I'll look into it. Rick Moorfield is my contact on that.
Yeah.
In Hinton, so I'll find out more about that and we can post it maybe in the comments.
Yeah, and maybe more places do it where there's larger bodies of water. Where I am right now, like there's just this creek, right? And then the Guy and Dot. And
But the lakes are really where you...
there's Lake Stevens, and then and R.D. Bailey. But I never got on a boat until I met Tom.
Oh, wow.
And he took me to Florida, and they lived on Lake Okeechobee.
Oh, neat.
So if you're familiar with Florida, Lake Okeechobee is, we always say, it's that blue dot. When you look at southern Florida, it's that big blue dot. And we were on the lake, and his dad lived right on the canal. He had airboats. He took people out on tours. He did bass fishing. He took people out bass fishing, like as a guide. He was a captain. Like, in order to do that in Florida, he had to take his captain's license. So he's a captain. And so that was the first time I had ever been in a boat, was on the lake. I have always had, I don't know if you would call it a healthy fear of water, right? Because my dad's always been terrified of water. And so I guess he made me terrified of water. and we never really went on vacation when after I was born, because my parents basically started over with me. My brothers are 10 years older than I am. And so they were all like, yeah, we went to the beach and we would go camping. I'm like, they never did that with me. You know, not until I was like 16 did I go on vacation with them. And the first time I went to the beach was with a friend when I was 14. And so I was always afraid of the water. I've lived in West Virginia most of my life. I've never been whitewater rafting, and I never will. You're not going to get me on the water. I don't care to ball in a ball, and I'm not going to. Land is good. Land is good.
I grew up in West Virginia, and I whitewater rafted once in college before I left college on the Gauley, and it was whichever one is the easy one. This was 25 years ago. I think it's the upper is the easy.
I have no idea.
Anyway, it was great. It was mellow. There was a couple, intense rapids, but then there were big long pools and, a couple smaller rapids, and it's the new.
Yeah.
My first real whitewater rafting experience was in Colorado.
I was going to ask you if you ever did it in Colorado, because now I hear that's some pretty intense.
On the Arkansas snow melt.
Ooh, wow.
Every week leading up to the trip, somebody died on the river. And part of my job at the time was to read headlines from across the state. So I got a newspaper from every part of the state, and I was reading the headlines. And I just had to come to terms with the fact that if I was going to go that way, that's how I was going to go. I could either choose not to go or go. And I'm glad I went.
What I think of, because I'm always scripting just like Ricky is, and I always think of movies, and I think of that, is it Up in Smoke, where he hits that weed and he starts coughing, and he's like, are you sure I should do this, man? It's like, that's all I could think of is when you're like, somebody died on that river every week leading up to that. Well, like, are you sure I should do this?
That's how I felt. And this is how naive I was. We get to the raft place and they have, bodysuits and helmets. And I look at the guy and I'm like, I definitely want a bodysuit and helmet. And he looked at me, he said, they're not optional. Okay. So we put bodysuits, thermal bodysuits on and helmets. And
yeah, I bet it was like super, super cold.
Well, snow melt, it's glacier melt from the Rockies.
Wow.
So very cool. I mean, it was a very cool experience. And I went
with beautiful too.
Spectacular. I went with a great group of people. My friends in Colorado are some of the most amazing folks on the planet. And it was literally like 7 hours of hardcore, solid whitewater. Constant, nonstop, left, back, right, front, forward, side, just calls, and it was exhausting.
No, thank you.
It was terrifying.
No, thank you. I'm good.
And it was exhausting, and it was spectacular, and I have no desire to ever go again.
Can I be the person that just hangs out at the camp when y'all get back and have the food ready?
Hell
and,
yeah.
all the
I'm right
party
there with
favors
you.
And be like, welcome back. I'm glad you didn't die.
I'm part of the hospitality crew from this point forward, for sure. But again, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did it in my 20s when I was able-bodied. But I remember on that trip, someone had lost their raft. There were 2 people rafting by themselves who looked pretty inexperienced. And they came out of the raft, and our guide, of course, who was a trained professional, offered rescue to them. They were both on the shore. They declined, and, I guess they called whoever to get help. But I will never forget that woman's face was as white as your wall.
I bet she's got a story to tell.
From the middle of the river, I could tell that they went through a couple of big rapids.
Well, they lost their raft, and then they were
was it in
just
the water.
The 2 of them, and they happened to.
They thought they knew what they were doing, and they were clearly out of their class. They did not have she didn't have a wetsuit on. They may have had helmets. I don't recall. I just remember she had long brown hair, and she was white as a sheet. And they were fine, and that's great. And I'm not aware that anybody died that day, but it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. And so
I'm not gonna get on there. No. And now, I mean, I know some people that'll do it every year.
I know raft
They
guides. I
love
went to
it.
high school with
Yeah.
folks who did ski instructing
I
in the summer
there
or
was
winter.
somebody, I can't even remember his name, but he was a raft guide, and then he also he would film it too. And then he would do these weird tricks, and
Oh, he was the kayak guy who would go ahead
And, yeah.
set up and get your shots. Yeah.
and I did a little video. The first time I edited anything on Final Cut Pro in college, when we got our first computer, just to play around with it, was a video of him in the kayak going off of Brush Creek Falls.
Oh, neat.
he goes upside down and then back up, and I'm like, dude, no. And he's like, oh, that was awesome. I'm like, I can't breathe.
I lived in Lyons.
I can't breathe.
In Lyons, Colorado, the river that ran through Lyons, and it would take me a minute. I want to say the St. Vrain River, which is about the size of Indian Creek, quite frankly, because in Colorado, what we would call a creek is a river. But it was also like a kayak training course. They had built kayak holes in it so they could do flips and turns and learn that. So you could go down to the St. Vrain and in the park and watch the kayakers in the summer. There was also a giant eagle's nest in the cliff right across the river. So the river's maybe 15 or 20 feet across. Again, not a very big space. And then there's a sheer rock wall. And maybe 30 or 40 feet up, you could see the edge of the nest. And the very first time I showed up in town, this town I lived in for, several years in Colorado, we sat down on the rock by the river, and here comes the eagle. And just swoops in and lands in the nest. And it was
that'd be
the
so cool.
Coolest. It was like a big welcome, welcome to Colorado feeling for me. But the water sports people are intense. Like, they really are. They're really intense.
It's a whole other breed, and man, if y'all into that water sports, my hat's off. 'cause
Absolutely. It's fun to watch.
It's fun to watch, but I can't do it. And then when you go under, I have to go. And I'm one of those people. I'm terrified of like drowning. Like, even watching movies or shows where someone's drowning, or and I'm like, I want to breathe for them, and I can't. It's like, I can't take it. I can't take it.
I'm like that with caves too. And what movies and stories about being trapped in caves or in small places are.
There's no way I'd go in a cave.
Oh, I've gone into caves like an idiot.
I mean, I'm not saying I won't go into a cave. I'm saying if it starts to get a little sketchy and I can't see and all that, and I'm by myself, no.
I have a cave story too. I didn't almost die. I thought I might, but I do have a cave story.
Tell it.
In southern West Virginia, you have a lot of karst in the eastern counties, and the karst has caves in it. And in the early 1900s, they were saltpeter mines. They mined saltpeter out of these caves because these were ancient oceans, right? And so in order to get in some of these spaces, they used children in the mines. And there are rooms in these mines that have where kids wrote their names back in the 20s and 30s.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had some friends that grew up over there and knew they'd gone into the caves and spent a lot of time in them. I do not recommend this. Do not follow people into caves that are not publicly owned. These are now blocked off. You can't do what we used to do because it was so incredibly dangerous. And I had no idea, again, as a kid. I had no clue.
These are the things that will get a teenager killed.
And they absolutely are. And but it was really fascinating. And we were with a pretty decent sized group, and were following someone who had been in there a lot and knew his way around. But there was a section of the cave that you came to that was called, I think it was that part that was called Fat Man's Misery. There were two parts that were very thin. One was a upright vertical where you had to kind of walk along the wall and squeeze through two planes like this, and the other one we were in a room, and the guy who was leading us said, have you ever seen a translucent fish? Have you ever seen a fish with no pigment in its scales? And we're like, well, of course not. And he said, well, there is some water. You got to get to it. We have to continue to go, but there's water where you can shine a light down and you can see fish that are see-through. So he points to a hole in the wall of this room that we're in. And the hole is probably like the size of what is under one side of a kitchen table, a normal kitchen table. Didn't look too intimidating. So he goes into it. I follow him, and his brother comes in behind me. And this hole goes from, the size of under a kitchen table to much smaller, down to the point where I was army crawling. And I finally reached and grabbed a hold of the guy's foot in front of me. And I stopped him and I said, I'm not doing this I can't do this anymore. And he said, we're almost there. Just 10 more feet, 12 more feet. And I was like, all right. And I let him go. And he was right. I followed him, and we opened up into a smaller room. Nobody else followed us in. It was just the three of us. And in hindsight, that was really smart of them, because they had no idea where we were going.
I would have been like, let's just wait and see what happens today, y'all.
You were in that group, right?
Yeah.
But what I saw was the room where all of the names were etched on it. And then we didn't go far enough down to see the fish, but it was cool to go back in there. And once I knew that going into the small hole was going to open up into larger holes, it was easier to get back out. Incredibly dangerous. I come trotting home and tell my mom and dad about this. Spelunking, I learned, was what it's called from them that day. And probably 2 or 3 hours later, my dad comes and sets a milk crate in front of me, and it has knee pads and gloves and ropes and helmets.
If you're going to go do this here, be safe.
That's exactly what he said. He was like,
that's the equivalent of your dad handing you condoms.
That's exactly right. If you're going to be an idiot, at least wear some fucking protection, because you're an idiot. You are an idiot.
Your parents are so awesome.
My parents are the best. They always let us, but I think the caves really scared them.
Of course, it would have scared me
Of
too. And
course.
just think, if your son had come home and said that, you would have been like,
I would have made him watch videos of people getting trapped in caves. Now
what's
we have
that movie where it was a true story.
about the kids
The
in
kid that
Thailand?
the kid that cut his arm off.
Oh, that was in
It was in Colorado or not Colorado.
one of the national parks where he got stuck. Monuments National Park or somewhere where he got stuck.
Yeah, and he had to cut his arm
He was
off.
bouldering, I think, and he slipped and fell and got in a jam. It's easy to do. I told you about, getting hung up in the woods on a big tree that fell. Mm-hmm. You get yourself into situations sometimes in nature where it's a lot easier to go up than it is to come down, number one. It's so much easier to go up than it is to come down. And when you get in precarious situations, you really have to stop and think, because it's easy to mess up really quick.
I didn't even think of this the day that I was with Laura Lee and we were mugging. The wind was blowing pretty bad, and me and her just walking along. We're looking for muggins. We're looking at rocks. We're just hanging out, having a good time. And she calls her husband because he had found some muggins the day before. She's like, where are they? And then he was just like, hey, that wind's blowing pretty bad. Y'all better look out for them widowmakers. And I'm like,
Yep.
oh shit, I didn't even think of that.
You get seasoned.
And then the wind would
yeah.
blow and I'll be like,
You do. You look up and make sure you're not under anything that's precarious. Mm-hmm. And you just it's one of those things. It's like looking for snakes.
oh yeah.
You're always, when you're scanning in the woods, it may look like we're not, we're just walking through the woods. No.
I'm always looking to where I'm stepping.
You're always looking where you're putting your feet. Always.
And you always got to realize, and you got to know what a copperhead looks like. You got to know what a rattlesnake looks like and sounds like. And you got to know that they blend in, especially with the leaves and all that. They blend
And we
in.
probably walk by hundreds of snakes and never even bother them, and they don't bother us because we don't see them.
They usually slide away, and then we in precarious areas that look like snakes would hang out. We do our little, what we call our snake dance, and we're just stomping, going, hey snake, leave me alone, snake. And you just sing and dance and make noise.
Sound and
because,
vibration.
they'll run away for the most part.
But they're there.
Oh yeah.
And again, that's a bears,
They're
bobcats,
right here,
snakes.
Here, there's probably copperhead right here in my backyard.
Without doubt.
There's
Without
got to
doubt.
be, because there's all kinds of rocks and stuff.
But those are things you just, again, you're aware of. It's like living in the city. You're aware that you don't leave your car unlocked. You don't go certain places by yourself at night because you make yourself vulnerable to certain situations. Not that it would happen, but you just don't take unnecessary risks, like going into a cave with a bunch of children when you're a teenager.
My mom always called it better safe than sorry.
Right.
Better safe than sorry.
Right. So I think those life lessons are what we, one of the things we talked about today in terms of our near-death experiences. So you're not, you don't love water, obviously, but have you ever had an experience in water that freaked you out or scared you?
I tried to dive off the diving board one time at Pineville when I was little, and I knew I can swim enough to keep my head above water, but when I lived in North Carolina, I was in, I think, 4th grade. They actually took us to a place once a week, and we had swimming lessons, which was crazy to me. I'm like, what the hell? We had Spanish class, and they taught us to swim in North Carolina. So you started out, like, they tested everybody to see what level they were at.
Sure.
The lowest level was tadpole. That was me at the beginning, right? So I can't even get on the damn boogie board. And, I was one of those kids. I love to swim. And I remember our family reunions used to be, I think it's called like Lake Lenore Lake or something like that. It's in like Mingo, Logan County area. And there was like a swimming pool. It was next to a creek, so I could go play in the creek. We could go swim in the swimming pool. But our family reunion was always like 1st of June, so sometimes it was a little too chilly.
Mm-hmm.
But I still, even when I got to go swim, all my cousins were in there swimming, and I'd run, and then I'd sit on the edge, and then I'd get in. And I'd never get in water above my head, ever. And I don't know, this was around teenage years. I thought, I'm going to dive off the diving board. I know how to keep my head above water. I'm going to see if I can do it. And I did it, but it scared the shit out of me, and I ain't never done it again. Never. Ever. And I'm not one to, like I said, we got on the boat in Okeechobee, but that was like go fishing, or we get on an airboat or something like that. So water, I don't have any stories of water. My stories of almost dying come from my drug use, my addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And the one story, and I may have told you this story because I feel like I told it not too long ago. And I don't think I told it on the podcast, but it was just like I was telling someone about it. So, in the end of my addiction, I was going to the methadone clinic. And in the beginning of a methadone clinic, you have to go to the clinic every single day. And they're only open like 4 in the morning until 11 or 12 o'clock, and then they're closed, right? So you got to get there in the morning. Once you're there for a while and you drug test clean and you're doing your counseling and your bullshit and the whole thing, they'll allow you to get take homes. So I had a whole week's worth. So I would only go once a week, right? So, which was bad because as soon as I get a take home, I'd get a little more out there, right? And then by the end of the week, I wouldn't have any, and I'd be sick. And I was drinking alcohol, and I was taking Valiums, and I was doing whatever. And I would just make sure I had clean pee, right? Well, I was on my way. Oh, and I worked at I was a case manager at a juvenile detention center while I was doing this.
Interesting.
I wasn't very good at it, but I hated that job. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be very good at that job now. It just wasn't for me. But I would go on, I don't remember, it might have been like Fridays or whatever. But I had to be at work at like 8 or 9. I had to go get my methadone at West Palm Beach, which was 2.5 hours away. Wow. And so I had to get up. I had to leave the house at like 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning, and then go get my methadone and then go to work, right? So I wasn't getting much sleep. The job was terrible. I was not doing well, obviously. Obviously. But I had to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was on my way to the methadone clinic. And so it's Southern Florida, and it was a 4-lane, right? But it wasn't a very busy 4-lane because it was like 4 o'clock in the morning.
And it's straight and long and empty.
And you're tired. And like, what do they call it? Road
blindness.
Not road paralysis. Road where they put you to sleep. You're getting sleepy. Road hypnosis. Yeah. Road hypnosis. And I would get that, and I'd nod and I'd shake, whatever. Well, I know I nodded out, and I was getting close to West Palm, so I was hitting some red lights here and there. And there was this little pickup truck with a camper on the back of it in front of me. And I nod out, and I wake up, and the truck is coming. He stopped. And so I slam on my brakes, and my car goes on the median on the right side, around him and in front of him. I don't know how. It almost felt like something picked my car up and placed me in the spot where I needed to be. And I just went driving back on. And I'll never forget that moment. I'll never forget where it was. That it was just one of those profound moments of I don't know.
I'm out of control.
Yeah.
I'm out of control. Those moments when you are pushing your body and your mind to its absolute max. And we've talked about the on this podcast, talking about the things that make us who we are.
Yeah.
Often successful people and driven people have experienced those times in their life where they are maxed out across the board. And that's when accidents happen.
Oh, for
And that's
sure.
when, overdoses happen. And that's when, you negligently harm somebody else, and those are the sadness around that is that, but for the grace of God go I, right? Like it could happen to anybody. I've nodded off driving. One time that I remember when I was in college, I was working nights. and going to school in the day, and I was sleeping whenever I could. And I was very fortunate that I dozed off and woke up close enough to where I could stop, and I stopped. But yeah,
I totaled a car after that, falling asleep. And I was still on. No, that was before that. I had already totaled a car going to sleep.
But if you're a grown up, those are the moments that shake you.
Absolutely.
You pay attention.
It wasn't too long after that, like within a few months. Well, let's see, I was still working there, so probably 6 months to a year. That's when I decided to go into rehab and all that.
Sometimes it takes a
lot. Like that was just one little thing, and then a whole bunch of other stuff happened. That just left me shook and was like, something's watching over me. And I don't know if we're going to head to this spiritual thing or not, but I feel like these near-death experiences that I've had, I've always felt like I'm divinely protected. And if you talk to a lot of people that know me at the moment and knew me then, they would say, she doesn't believe that. She doesn't believe in God. Actually, I do believe in God.
Right, I know that.
I really need to say that because I don't believe in someone's religion. They want to come at me and say, well, you don't believe in God, Actually, I do. I just don't believe in your hell. That's it. I don't believe in hell. I don't believe. I cannot subscribe to a God that says, you're going to do everything that I say and obey and all of this. Like, this is all your life is about. That's not what life is about. I'm supposed to learn and grow from these things. Like, I make these mistakes. It didn't kill me. I didn't kill someone else. So I need to do something with that. I still have my freedom. I still have my life. It took me a long time to understand that because, you know, I had to get myself right. I had to realize who I was. I had to start loving myself. And then I had to, like, tell people who I was because they didn't know.
Well, and sometimes you have to learn who you are.
Exactly. And that's what I've had to do
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't know who I was. But those are the whole falling asleep and total in a car. I mean, I thought that I flipped the car.
Because of how it moved.
I guess. And it was really my first real big wreck,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially when I was driving. And I thought I flipped, but I hit the, because I fell asleep and I woke up and I was missing the curve and there was a cliff right here. And I hit the cliff and spun around and hit it again.
Like a pinball.
Yeah. And so my tires were like flat. You get that? Who
Yeah,
is it?
let's stop because
Yeah.
it's.
So I wanted to say one thing about the water though,
Mm-hmm.
because Ricky is autistic, right? And we all know that people with autism are attracted to water. He's always been attracted to water, and anytime we took him to the beach or anywhere, we had to make sure he had proper life jackets. And I was thinking about where Laura Lee lives. I was like, I can keep Ricky. Like, I love this place and I love your yard and all that, but I would be terrified to have Ricky there just because he's so attracted to it.
It's a legitimate concern when you live right on the river because the river is such a draw and you spend so much time in the water and fishing and it can get you and grab you in an instant
You have to respect the water.
all the time. But I do want to kind of pursue this divinely protected idea because
I think I am.
I feel the same way. And I feel like there have been moments where I have found myself in situations where something has happened that has been tragic and awful and really maybe even hurt my body. But in hindsight, it kept me from the real tragedy.
Right.
Right.
It's like, well, this ain't gonna happen, but you got, and I feel like there's always a sacrifice in some way.
I feel the same way that there's always
You know?
kind of, but that's the lesson too, is that's the wake up call. That's here's your sign.
Yeah.
You remember the 90s
Here's your sign.
comedian,
Now-
here's your sign.
And it's like, you got a wake up call, and do you take that call? Do you listen? Or do you continue?
I listened. I don't ride motorcycles.
Tell this story, because you've told me before.
Yeah, it's again motorcycle safety. Always wear your helmet and protective clothing. Those bike leathers are made in a way that when you're on the bike, the air moves through them. That's why biker jackets are loose and made the way they are. It's also like a skin. If you hit the ground in a biker jacket, it lets you move inside as it rolls. It's like a skin on you, a protective skin. So wear your protective equipment when you are on motorcycles. Again, in my 20s, I found myself on a motorcycle in sandals and a tank top and no helmet
Oh my God.
in Texas on the back of a bike with no bar with a person who didn't give two shits about me. So there's all kinds of mistakes right there.
Also, be careful of who you are hanging out with, right?
Bad company is
crazy people
bad
that go
company.
spelunking into little holes, and men and.
Are you saying I make bad choices about my friends? Because
Are you
I'd
man?
be careful there. Touche.
Oh,
I'll own that shit though.
look, we live and learn.
It is what it is.
That was your 20s. That I'm not talking about today.
I've had one in every decade actually. So anyway, back to the motorcycle accident. I got on the back of a bike and was going to a place where I shouldn't have been. And I was on the interstate going 70 miles an hour with nothing on my body and nothing on my head. And we got off the interstate on the exit ramp and pulled into like a neighborhood. And in Texas, the suburbs, like the neighborhoods are right off the interstate. Like you exit the interstate and turn into like a neighborhood. So we exit the interstate and we turn into the neighborhood and we go maybe 2 stops. And at the second stop sign, I relaxed. And I'd been holding on the entire time. But when I relaxed, I did it at the same time that he took off. And when I went to reach for him, he dropped another gear. And literally the bike came out from under me because I wasn't holding on to anything and there was nothing to keep me on the back. So I was coming off the bike face first at the ground, and I always say my vanity is what saved my life. As I was like, not my face.
Not the money maker.
I had to scrape my face up on the pavement, so I threw my head back and tried to roll.
Yeah.
And when I tried to roll, all I did was dig my shoulder and my back into the pavement and slide on the pavement and tear, the skin off of half my back and down my arm.
This was Texas, and
Yeah,
you said
this
you were
was-
wearing tank top and
top.
shorts, so I guess it was summertime.
Oh, no, I was wearing tank top and jeans. I was being responsible on that bike. I had a pair of jeans on.
I'm just saying. I bet the pavement was also pretty damn hot.
It was at night, so the pavement wasn't hot, and thankfully there wasn't a lot of people around. But it was an incredibly, it was in places 3rd-degree burn, road rash. I still have a jacked up middle finger. I jammed my middle finger when I hit the
So
pavement.
you fall off of this bike.
Mm-hmm.
Did the dude see you fall? Did he realize?
Well, he knew I was no longer on the
Hey,
back of the bike.
where's that pretty blonde? What happened?
I think the people I was with were probably completely blown away. I have a superiorly high tolerance for pain, like kind of a scary high tolerance for pain.
Was it just you and him on a motorcycle, or was there people?
There were a couple other
People
folks
behind
with us.
you?
No, we were the last. Nobody was behind
Nobody
us.
was behind you to see
Everybody
you?
who was going
They
there.
all just left you at that red light.
It was a stop sign.
Or stop
So
sign.
yeah, they had already gone to the house. They
Right.
were already in the house when we got there because he had to stop and come back and get me.
Did he just pick you up and you got back on the
Well, I
bike?
said, how far is the house? And he said, it's right up here. And it was like maybe half a block.
Right.
I got off the bike, walked into the house, literally as I was walking in, was taking off my clothes, walked to the nearest bathroom and got in the shower and just washed the gravel out of my open wound
Ooh, God.
on my back. And so, yeah, it was awful.
And
But
this
I
is
didn't
a house
cry.
you didn't even...
Never had been there before. And everybody there is like, of
Did you
course.
know everybody there? Or?
No, just the one person I was with. And so I never shed a tear that entire time. And thankfully, the person whose house we were at, his wife was a nurse and had this giant triage kit. And so they cleaned my wounds with saline and like a professional way. And they were bikers, they dealt with road rash. It wasn't like,
Right. We've seen this
what
before.
they couldn't believe is I didn't cry. I didn't shed one tear, but I was in shock.
Mm-hmm.
I had adrenaline going, and I have a crazy high tolerance for pain. But I wasn't going to go to the doctor. I went home that night. The girl I was staying with almost killed that guy. She was livid that she sent me away fine, and I came back broken because she loves me.
Mm-hmm.
She gave 2 shits about me.
Yeah.
But the next morning, it was very apparent I had to go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got Silverdine.
Oh, yeah.
It's magic.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, you can watch a burn heal in a day. It was magic. But I went through that with no pain meds because it was during the opioid epidemics where you couldn't get pain meds. They gave me synthetic pain medication that every time I took it, I threw up. It was awful. So my voice shakes and my body is tense because it was a very hard injury. And we didn't have cell phones. I don't have pictures of it, thankfully, But I feel as though had that accident not happened, what I was walking into would have been awful. In hindsight, I think I wasn't aware of where I was and who I was with. And that's also a very important lesson for young women who are out there on their own. You know, I was by myself in Texas. I was a lawyer. I graduated law school. I believe at that point I'd taken the bar exam because that accident happened in between when Katrina hit New Orleans and Rita hit Beaumont. So it was in like the 2 weeks in between. So, for years I had PTSD. Sometimes at night, right in my twilight phase, right as I was going to sleep, I would be on the back of the bike on the interstate, and the bike would come out from under me going 70 miles an hour. And I would wake up and, jolt awake before I hit. And that happened, probably a dozen times. And one night, I let myself hit. I let myself hit the ground.
Really?
And when I hit the ground, when I came out of it, I came out with a sob, and I released.
You've been holding it in.
I'd been holding
right?
it in. That fear of that could have happened for years. I held that trauma in my body. And when I finally just let my head hit the pavement, because I was in therapy, I was in psychotherapy, I was going every week to therapy, I was learning how to unpack things in myself and look at them.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happened and I made the choice to just
let it go,
when I came out of that state, heaving and sobbing, it was one of the best feelings in the world. It was like I survived that. That didn't happen to me.
Let it out.
And how your body stores trauma, that's very real.
Oh my God. And it will come out physically.
It will, and if you keep it in, it'll hurt you.
It will.
It will impact how you move.
Mm-hmm.
It will impact how you digest food. People are not familiar with and not comfortable with what they consider woo-woo or metaphysical stuff, but the reality is that your thoughts have a profound impact on your body.
I think so too, and I learned this through cancer treatments, all through cancer, because I look, when you get a cancer diagnosis, you yourself, all of a sudden, your mortality hits you. You start planning your own funeral. You start thinking about life. Why are we here? What's the point? Why? And then all of the things that I have been taught, and then all the things that I don't even know, all the things that other people are being taught. And I'm like, where? This world is so massive and everybody thinks something completely different. I cannot believe that only one person is correct. You know what I mean?
Not only do I know what you mean, but I'll share a tiny bit of my personal philosophy that we are here to be human, to experience that in every different possible form.
And what that means to be human. Right.
To taste, to touch, to laugh, to feel, to lose,
to feel
to love,
every single emotion, good, bad, ugly,
to feel every texture, to taste the different tastes, to experience pain. And I know, again, this is my very personal understanding of when I question why. I really do believe that we are, God experiencing God. Yeah, that we are consciousness experiencing itself in every way, shape, and form possible, which explains the diversity, which explains this special blue dot in space as a place to experience that, as a garden.
Right.
To experience this very particular type of experience in the universe, which makes life so precious.
When you think about it.
It makes it so divine. It makes it so incredibly just special.
It does.
And so, yeah, I'm like you, you can say because I don't espouse the words and the things that you want me to that I don't believe in God, but brother, let me tell you.
Oh my God.
Do I believe in God?
Oh my God.
Every day. How can you live where we live and not joyously rejoice in the creation? So, yes, divine protection, I have felt it many times in my life.
I have too. And I think and ooh, I don't even know how to start this. So I'll be driving down the road, right? And there was this one day I was just driving down this road, and I kept thinking, you need to watch out for that car. You need to watch out for that car. You better watch out for that car. That car's on your side of the road. I'm like, what in the hell am I doing? Like, what's going on? And I kept thinking, you got to watch out for that car. You got to watch out for that car. Well, I went like, I don't know, 5 minutes or something. And all of a sudden I get on the straight stretch and there's a car passing another car, and I had to slam on my brakes. And I was like, oh, that car. And so it freaks me out because I'm like, that's just in my head, but then things happen. And I'm like, is that a coincidence or are there coincidences? Is this
or
real?
is your intuition, are you really dialed in to where you can sense that?
I don't even know if I am. Even if I am, I don't know if I am.
Right. And we don't. None of us do. This is something that's been demonized.
It is. And I get called a demon. I get called, or I have, not that I'm a demon, but that demons are plaguing me.
Residing inside of you.
And they are telling me what to say and do, even though I'm like, I don't fucking believe in you. In my opinion, like when you said your brain is very powerful, right?
Absolutely.
And you give power to things.
Correct.
And so when someone is like, this object, this thing, this idea is evil, it's evil, that's because you're making it evil.
Bringing it.
You are bringing that evil energy into that thing, right? It's only evil what you make it. If it hasn't physically hurt you in any way, how is it evil? If I just, like, I don't understand. A lot of times I'm like, I don't understand. I don't get it.
It's how I think of it is people, you have to fit into boxes for some people to understand. You're an incredibly intelligent person.
Aw.
We know people who are so smart at the things they know well, like genius level mechanics, technicians, gardeners, canners, engineers, right? Like across our knowledge power in these communities is phenomenal. My knowledge power happens to be an academic knowledge. I have knowledge of history, legal history, post-World War II national security, if you want to get specific. You want to dig into that, I will anytime. Let's talk Afghanistan and Vietnam. I'm a total
podcast problem.
I'm such a nerd. But I think it's very important in this moment to say one knowledge is not better or less than or over or superior to.
Girl, don't even.
Right?
Girl, you don't have to tell me that, because here is my thing. Mm-hmm. And this is why I feel like I'm so smart. And this is why I think you think I'm smart. Is because anytime someone comes to me with a problem, I'm a problem solver. I like to solve problems. And so I know that I can't solve every problem because I just don't, not everything is in my wheelhouse, and I don't know about everything. But I know a guy. Mm-hmm. I know someone that's like probably one of the top in what they do and know, not to say that they're like high ranking officials, but they're fucking smart as hell.
Right.
Okay. And they know their shit. Right?
Absolutely.
Like, you want to talk about history. If you want to talk about Civil War history, I know a guy that knows fucking everything about the Civil War. He teaches it. Right. If you want to know something about engineering and in the news, a news station, I know 2 or 3 guys that'll do that.
That's right. And I'm making this point because I feel like outsiders talk about our communities and they talk about elite educated people, and they try to divide us by making statements like that, when in fact within our communities there is no division.
No.
There is no elite status
You gotta
because
have
you have
somebody to do everything. Otherwise, a
Exactly.
community can't run.
That's right.
You take my dad. My dad can take a car apart and put it back together.
So can mine.
Now, when they start putting them computers
The
in there,
computers jacked everything up,
He goes,
yeah.
they start putting them computers in there. You can't do nothing with it. I said, I know, Daddy. They know gears or nothing.
That's why you need an old farm truck sitting around that works like a tractor, so you know how to fix it. Right?
That's why he wants him a Cavalier. He loves him a Cavalier. So it's like, yeah, he can't do his fucking taxes, but he can fix your damn car or whatever. You
And
know?
to stand outside of where we are and say elites are telling you this and people with college educations look down on you. No, we know they don't, because we are those people.
I'm college educated. I actually have a degree. I do. Whether or not half of y'all think that it's worth anything, I actually think it is, especially in times like these.
Navigating our current social situations, it's incredibly important to have some skills and some context.
And some understanding.
And how did we get here? Why do we think the way we think about media, this, that? Understanding those things, and it's not for everybody. My mechanic dad doesn't want to, necessarily study that. I'm fascinated by it.
Social psychology, man, I went into social
Super
psychology
interesting.
class, and that's how I knew I was going to do sociology, was because I went in there and I got an A, and I didn't even try.
Right, you loved it.
I was like, fuck, this is easy.
Political theory.
Easy.
I've my first couple political theory classes, I was like, that's it. Like, I will take every one of these for my GPA from here on out. And it turned me into a strategist and an analyst and someone who looks at things that have gone before, tweaks them, adjusts them, and can recommend them in the current situation. Our college educations don't make us elite or better than or separate than. It's an additional resource to our community.
And we also network to where we know people that can do other things.
Without doubt. Who needs a water study done? We know somebody.
I got a guy.
Who needs a survey done? We know somebody.
Right.
Who needs to talk about personal investment? We know somebody. That's part of being in the community, though, right? And you don't have to. What we've lost, as connected as we are globally, locally, we've lost those canning circles and quilting circles and the old guys sitting around in the garage, taking the motors apart and building old hot rods to run up and down the straight stretch. I know you did it here because they did it there.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You liar. You liar. You drag racing out here like everybody else. But
My brother did, because he got several tickets in the Monte Carlo, but we ain't going to talk about that, are we, Gary?
no, we don't talk about that.
No, but my dad just wanted to work on a car.
But these things are imposed upon us like, we're supposed to accept that these divisions exist within our communities. They do not.
Right.
They do not. That is a falsehood that is put against us. And I think having an education, if you're privileged enough to have it, that's great. It's not particularly useful
No.
these days. I know lots of folks with college degrees who either do their own thing or consult or work for somebody else.
That's what I do.
Absolutely. It's even with a professional degree, like a law degree, it's much easier for me to work with an organization than it is to have my own law firm. It's just onerous to support yourself and other people. It's a lot of work.
It is.
And so you make those decisions how I want to spend my time and my energy. And my rational decision is I step into a different structure where I may not maximize my income, but I also don't kill myself.
Yeah.
And I get to spend time in my community and connect the resources and be useful and do the house calls and
Do the things that other people don't want to do.
the other things people don't want to do.
We got to have, there are jobs that people don't want to do,
Of course.
and that's,
There are jobs in my house that I don't want to do. if
there's
anyone
jobs,
would like to come
look
do them.
around, that you can tell the jobs that I don't like
Your
to
house
do.
looks amazing today, by the way. You have clearly worked very hard on your environment today. It is spectacular
My
and spotless.
environment needs help. Now, don't look over there. Don't
You
look
can
in
look
that
over here at my tutors.
Don't look in that closet either. I was talking to my friend Jessie because I'm trying to figure out how to move furniture around. My mom is really good with that, but she's with my dad a lot. But she did come and help because they were going to go get the mail, and I was like, I need help moving a chair. And so I was on the phone with Jesse, and I was like, help me figure out how to do this, because I got to get my shit together.
It looks cute. Yeah.
I really got to get my shit together. And you were like, what sparked this? Me getting some jobs that I got to get my shit together. And like, I got to have a workspace.
Turns out you're really good at what you do.
I mean, who knew?
And people are excited to work with you and compensate you for your knowledge.
I know, it's pretty crazy. And I really want to tell people what's going on, but I'm keeping it a secret right now. Even though I think it's been out there on social media, but I don't even know.
Well, there's a time for everything.
Yeah, we'll go over it when it happens. So stay tuned this summer.
Stay tuned. But we've covered, near-death experiences, woo-woo, metaphysical, divine, and
I think I have almost everything that I was gonna talk about on here. Yeah, I think. What time is it? We've been going for an hour. We do an hour, so that's pretty good. Yeah. But let's see, what else is there? Honestly, nothing. I got nothing.
We're going to dig into timeline shifts and Mandela effects one day, because this is something that's mind-boggling to me. I am old enough to remember stuff.
Well, and you know that thing that happened to me and Laura Lee. You want me to tell that story now?
I think we'll hold off on that one, because I want to dive deep into that and pull up some examples online and stuff and look at some things, because I know it's interesting and not a lot of people understand it. I
guess nowadays you call it glitch in the matrix.
Yeah, you could say glitch in the matrix, but the idea that, if anything that could happen or did happen or will happen is currently happening, and how we interpret it is kind of how we perceive our reality, then any number of variations is possible at any time.
Right.
It's endless, right?
Well, isn't there some sort of scientific thing? I'm not a scientist, but isn't there like
quantum entanglement,
where there is proof that there are other like timelines or what is it called? What do they call them? Not timelines, but
it's
realities, alternate realities.
Right.
Alternate realities.
And so, I'd like to dive into some of that, because I think it's interesting.
It is.
There is some science behind it. Quantum entanglement is a fascinating. We should probably get some people who know a little bit more than us about it.
I'm not a scientist. I was not good in science.
But also the idea that if things had been just this way, or if your tire had hit that curb just a little differently, you might have flipped your car. Those types of instances, I think we should devote some time to that, because I think it'll be really interesting.
Oh, I see my kid coming home.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's time.
It is. He's like, you're ready. You're done. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Review us, follow us, and
share us.
Bye-bye. We don't have to clap, but I still like to clap. Okay, bye.
Appalachian Living is sponsored in part by Wade Law Firm, PLLC. Sage Stitch Finance Corporation, representing wisdom and mending what we already have, providing gap funds for resilient renovations.
Appalachian Living is also brought to you by Hope Money Coaching, rescuing you from financial chaos and leading you to a path of financial wellness. Minimalist Gym, helping men and women navigate their health and fitness without restrictive fad diets.